Welcome, bienvenidos to Presidio San Agustin. We're so glad that you can be with us today, even if it's just by video. Today we are going to take a look at how the city of Tucson first got started. So by the end of this video, you are going to know Tucson's birthday. You're going to know why this site was chosen to be the first fort, the first part of this city. And you're going to find out a little bit about the boys and girls who actually lived here inside the fort. Now, the city of Tucson starts with this fort. A fort in Spanish is called Presidio. And if you take a look, I'll show you where we are on this map. Today, most of you probably know about A Mountain right here. Now, A Mountain, I have to tell you, hundreds of years ago, it had no A on it. And instead, right here beneath it was a little mission church called San Agustin. And that's how we get our name, Presidio San Agustin. So at the base of this little mountain, our A Mountain today, you had the little mission church. They had some beautiful gardens. And you also had a village of friendly Pima Indians. And those Pima Indians actually helped build this fort. Now, if you go from A Mountain, you head this direction toward town, you come to the river, the Santa Cruz River. Today, we know that's the big dry ditch beside I-10. But hundreds of years ago, it was a beautiful flowing river all year round. In fact, it had so much water that it could water all of these growing fields that you see in green on my map here. And then, if you keep coming from there across the river, and you go on that path, you come to where the fort was. You had to kind of go up a little hill, and that's where Presidio San Agustin would be. Well, I told you that we would first take a look at how the city got founded. And I, of course, being a storyteller, you know I have to share a story with you about how it all got started. This story is called Two Men Were Walking, and it goes like this. Two men were walking along the banks of the Santa Cruz River. On one side, the taller one, was a Spanish officer in the Spanish army. He had been sent by the King of Spain to form a whole string of forts. His name was Hugo Ocanor. And Ocanor, despite the fact that he had ridden for thousands of miles, hundreds of miles, his uniform was of the highest standard. And one of the most surprising things about him was he had red hair. In fact, his soldiers nicknamed him El Capitan Colorado, the Red Captain, because he had that red hair. Now, walking beside him in sharp contrast was the somewhat shorter, somewhat rounder Padre Francisco Garces. Padre Garces was dressed in his long gray robes, his sandals, and he knew that if they would put a fort on this site on the Santa Cruz River, it would ensure the safety and perhaps the very survival of his two missions. The little one at the base of the mountain, San Agustin, and down the Santa Cruz, the mission San Javier. Now, the two of them had been walking for quite some time, and now they were just kind of enjoying the conversation back and forth. Ocanor spoke first. This Santa Cruz River, it flows well all year. Oh, si, said Padre Garces, it flows well all year. And this land, is this land fertile enough to grow enough food for all of my soldiers and their families? Perhaps several hundred people. Oh, si, said Padre Garces. Plenty of food. Look, we grow corn and beans and squash, and see the wheat fields. And wood, trees. Are there enough trees to build a fort of this size? It will be a good-sized fort. Oh, si, said Padre Garces. Plenty of trees. And these Pima Indians who live at the base of that little mountain, they are friendly and they would help us build this fort? Oh, si, said Padre Garces. Why, they are dear people. Why, every day I work with them in the fields. I eat with them. I laugh with them. They're good people. You will like them very much. And come, Padagar says, let us not waste any more time. Let us go and sign the decree. And on this site, we shall build Presidio San Agustin del Tucson. The day they sign that piece of paper becomes Tucson's official birthday. And that date is August 20th, 1775. Now, anybody who lives in Tucson really needs to know the birthday. So I'm going to say it 3 times. I want you to rehearse it in your head 3 times, and then I'll ask all of you when the birthday is. Here's our first practice. Tucson's birthday, the day they sign that piece of paper, is August 20th, 1775. August 20th, 1775. August 20th, 1775. You think you have it? I'll count to 3 and you tell me. 1, 2, 3. Very good. Tucson's birthday, August 20th, 1775. Well, I wanted to know when I came here. I knew the beginning of the fort, but this was a brand new fort in 1775. Where did the soldiers come from? Where did the families come from? What about the children who lived here in this fort? Where did they come from? And so I'm going to tell you a story about how they first came here. This story is called Sweetie the Rooster. But I have to tell you, he's no sweetie. And here's how that story gets started. It goes like this. Watch out, watch out! Here comes Sweetie the Rooster! Sweetie the Rooster was a little monster. Sweetie would run after you, fly up in your face, and peck you really hard. Everyone was afraid of that rooster. The children were afraid, the grown-ups were afraid, even the soldiers of the fort were afraid of that rooster. Everyone was afraid except for Mama. You see, Mama had raised that rooster from the time he was this little bitty chick. And every day he'd find Mama, he'd hop up in Mama's lap and he'd coo and he'd ruffle his feathers and Mama would pet him and tell him how much she loved him. But for everybody else, he was a monster. Now, it was particularly bad for a boy and girl named Tomas and Maria. You see, it was Tomas and Maria's mother who owned Sweetie the Rooster. Now, Tomas and Maria, they lived in the fort at Tubac. Some of you may have been to visit Tubac. And they lived there because their father was a Spanish officer in the Spanish Army. And in the summer of 1775, well, there was Papa and Mama. Tomas was the oldest, Maria a year younger. Then they had a 2-year-old brother named Jose. He was trouble. And then they had a little baby brother, a few months old. His name was Miguel. Well, in 1775, in August, when the decree was signed, that meant that the soldiers and families of Tubac must now become the first soldiers and the first families of Presidio San Agustin del Tucson. Tucson! Who'd ever heard of Tucson before? Certainly not Tomas and Maria. Well, they'd been born in Tubac and raised in Tubac, and their friends lived in Tubac, and their grandparents lived in Tubac, and they didn't want to leave. But Papa said it had been decreed. They would have to go. So they started to talk about what they were going to take with them. Mama wanted to take the big pot that she made her beans in. They had to take the pitcher they made their hot chocolate in. They all loved hot chocolate. Oh, and Mama wanted to take her chickens with her, which meant that Sweetie the Rooster was coming with them. So Papa built a cage for each of the hens, and then he built a bigger one for Sweetie the Rooster. Oh dear, those cages then were tied onto a pack mule, and that's how they made their way along, tied to the mule. Oh dear, it would be days and days of walking and riding and riding and walking, and Tomas and Maria had jobs for the trip. While Mama held baby Miguel, Tomas, he was in charge of Sweetie the rooster. Sweetie the rooster did not like being in a cage, so whenever they would stop to rest, Tomas would have to let Sweetie out and let him run around, and then when it was time to go, he'd have to grab Sweetie and stuff him back in his cage. And Maria, her job was not much better. She was in charge of 2-year-old Jose. And when that little 2-year-old didn't get his way, he'd kick and scream and stomp and bite. Could that child ever bite? Ooh, they weren't sure who had the worst job for the trip. Well, finally, the day came. It was time to go. It was late October, and it was time to line up. First went some scouts, some soldier scouts to guide the way, then the commandant and the padre. Then next came the soldiers with families and the soldiers without families. Then all the mules carrying the provisions for the fort. Then came all the extra horses and the cows and the sheep and if you can imagine this big long line of animals and people baaing and mooing and cowing and walking and riding up along the banks of the Santa Cruz River from Tubac to where the new fort would be. Oh, and whenever they'd stop to rest, Tomas would let Sweetie out. He'd run really quick and start attacking soldiers. And Maria was having a terrible time with little Jose. At the end of the first day of travel, Sweetie the rooster, he had attacked 3 soldiers, and little Jose had bitten 2. It was not a good first day. Well, finally, after about 3 days of walking and riding and riding and walking, they got to where the new fort was, and there wasn't much there. They had come from a full fort, and this thing was only about half built. There were some nice, friendly Pima Indians across the river there, but there wasn't much here. And that meant that everyone, including the children, no school. Even the children had to go to work to start the new fort. And when those children, oh my goodness, they would work with the animals, take care of the animals. They would be out in the fields seeding and weeding and harvesting and carrying things, carrying wood and carrying water. And when the children went to bed at night, they were exhausted. Well, one morning, some boys and girls of Tomas and Maria's age, it was their job to go to this one field and begin to pull the weeds out and get it ready for planting. They were in one section and the grown-ups were right next to them in the next section. And at the same time that the children were doing this land here and getting all the weeds out, they were supposed to be watching the 2-year-olds like Jose, the little toddlers. So beside their field was an open space where the toddlers could play. So they could do the field and watch the toddlers at the same time. And beside that open space where the toddlers were was this big outcropping of rock. Sweetie the rooster, he'd come along with them, because Sweetie knew that when they got out there digging sticks, oh my, they'd be turning over the earth and there would be bugs and worms to eat. And Sweetie really liked bugs and worms a lot. So he'd toddle along behind them. They'd only worked a short amount of time when all of a sudden, Sweetie let out this squawk, and he went flying over to where the toddlers were playing. And he'd fly up and squawk and fly up and squawk and fly up and squawk. The boys and girls thought, what is wrong with him? Is he attacking the little ones? And then they saw what Sweetie the rooster had seen first. Down out of those rocks had come a great big rattlesnake. And that snake had coiled itself up, and now it sat hissing at those little 2-year-olds. Sweetie, smart enough to stay out of striking distance, but Sweetie wouldn't stop flying up and squawking and flying up and squawking. He was trying to make that snake look at him and not at the little ones. And finally, that snake, he began to turn. He wanted to see what that obnoxious rooster was all about. About that time, one of the bigger boys took a hoe and hit the snake, killed the snake. Oh dear. And now the grown-ups who were working that next part of the field, they came running really quick. They heard all the commotion. What was wrong? And there they saw Sweetie. Sweetie was going up and down that rattlesnake. making sure it was really dead. Ah! Ha! Ah! Oh. After that, the people of the fort, they began to change their minds about that mean old rooster. I mean, he'd risked his life to save the children of Tucson. And now when people went by, oh, they'd give him some grain or some seeds to eat. Oh, Sweetie loved it. He loved all the extra food and he loved all the extra attention. And it wasn't long before that mean old rooster was quite fat, happy, and contented. And when those soldiers with the big flat black hats, when the soldiers would walk past him, as a sign of respect, a sign of honor for what he had done on that day saving the children, they would tip those big black hats and they would say, in honor, "Buenos dias, Señor Sweetie, the rooster who saved the children of Tucson." A story, a story. We hope that you'll be able to come and join us again soon. And until that time, please stay well. Adios. We hope to see you soon.